Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Sinmi Oyekola. Sinmi is a dual degree student pursuing an MBA and MPP, Masters of Public Policy, and she's a member of our full-time MBA class of 2026. I'd also like to note that she is the new president of the Graduate Women in Business Club. Sinmi and I recently connected to talk more about her background, her decision to pursue an MBA, how her first year has gone, her plans for summer, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to Experience Darden so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Sinmi Oyekola. Sinmi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brett. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. How are you doing? How's everything?
I'm doing really good. It's Darden Friday, so that's very exciting. Now the weekend has started, which is my favorite part of the week. What about you? How's your week going?
It's going well. You got to explain though what Darden Friday is, because our listeners may not necessarily know that.
Okay, so at Darden, we don't have classes on Fridays. So our Thursdays are like the last day of classes. And so we call that a Darden Friday, essentially.
Yeah, I went to law school. We had class Monday through Friday. If only I would have known.
No, you should have come to Darden, exactly. So you can have time, 3-day weekend.
That sounds very nice. So I'm glad you're doing well. How is Q4 going?
Q4 is going really well. It's only electives this quarter, so it's really feels like what you make it. I'm a bit sad because I'm not with members of my section anymore, so we're out of core, and there are people I haven't seen, which sucks. But I think overall it's a nice change of pace from like Q1, where I was mostly recruiting and academics, to really focusing more on building relationships and leadership opportunities going into the second year.
What section were you?
I was in section B, section best.
The birds, as I understand.
Birds, yes, we are the birds.
So how did you figure out what electives you wanted to take in this quarter? What are you taking right now?
I'm taking data visualization, financial reporting, valuations, and managing international trade. I guess when I was thinking about what electives I wanted to do, it was a mix between being able to stretch myself, but also doing things that I thought were interesting. So I'm a dual MBA, MPP, so public policy, and I really love econ. I did an undergrad as well, so I knew that I wanted to take at least one class that was focused on economics. The second thing was I enjoy like data visualization, and I also think that because data is a huge thing now, it's important to know not only how to read it, but how to also write and interpret. So I took data visualization, and I'll be interning with Evercore in New York doing investment banking. So I did financial reporting and valuation to really like hone those skills that I didn't have coming into Darden.
All right. Well, congratulations on your internship. When do you head up to New York?
Probably first week in June, because the internship starts the second week in June. So looking forward to that.
Well, that will be a fun summer. Well, thank you so much for taking some time for the podcast and come on and share your story with our listeners. So tell us a little bit more about you. Who are you and what's your background?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Nigeria. Part of my family is Ghanaian as well. So I grew up having a really fantastic childhood. I went to Emory University in Atlanta, and I studied math and economics, which in the moment felt like very hellish, but overall I really enjoyed the experience. It was definitely challenging in a good way. I graduated during COVID, so it was really interesting transitioning into a new job virtually while just like learning and trying to be an adult. So there I worked in real estate underwriting. After a year, I moved back to Nigeria because we have a year of mandatory national service where, it's more paramilitary. So the government places you in different parts of the community to serve. And so I was placed in a nonprofit healthcare organization. And my project focused on providing contraceptive care and economic empowerment to adolescent girls in northern and southern Nigeria, and I worked in the finance department. And in this role, I really, really, really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the best times of my life because I loved my coworkers, but I also really enjoyed the work because I could see the impact that I was making on the communities that I served. And so after that, I was thinking about how could I scale this and really be in a place where I can truly make a difference. And so I decided to apply to the dual MPP MBA program. So originally I was like, oh, I'm just going to do an MBA, but I'm like, I really, really, really enjoyed this government facing piece of, really building those relationships. And I wanted to understand how to be a leader, not only in a boardroom, but also in a more policy type setting. And I knew that balancing both of them would really be good. And I've seen in classes that are similar in the public policy school versus at Darden how, the different conversations go. Are we thinking about stakeholders, or are we thinking about just those conversations, really having that those two combined degrees has, I guess, really exploded my learning in ways that I could only have imagined coming in. I guess on the more personal side, I'm Christian, and that really makes up a lot of my life and why I do things that I do in terms of really service and living to make life as meaningful and as amazing for others as it is for me. Um, I also really like singing. I like dancing. I like arts. So on a weekend, if I'm trying to just, relax, you'll find me dancing to Afro beats. So that's something that I is a hobby of mine. And I have a fragrance collection of over 30 perfumes. So that's that is my guilty pleasure of going all around. Every time I travel, I try to find a sense in a place that is different from what I'm used to, because I think smells really bring a lot of memory into experiences, and so that's how I like catering and curating my experiences.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. Tell us a little bit more about how the MBA MPP dual degree works from a student standpoint.
Yeah, so it's a 3-year program. You can choose what program you want to start with. So I chose to start with the public policy. So you do 1 year in one school, the second year in the other school fully, and then the third year, which I'm going into, is a combination of both. Um, the annoying thing sometimes is that Darden runs a quota system and the other school runs a semester. So you really have to figure out how you want to balance, doing that. And a lot of my classmates are focused more on travel and everything now in their second year of going in. But then for me, I'm writing my capstone for the public policy degree. And so that I know is going to also take a good amount of my time. But I think it's worth it because the way I thought about it is regardless of what I do, time is going to pass. And I might as well do something that I'm really interested in and passionate about, even though it's a sacrifice. And I found that learning from both angles of, okay, in terms of how is this going to impact populations and people in terms of the policy piece as being a leader versus in the boardroom, whatever I'm doing, X, Y, and Z is going to affect the employees, the customers, and all of that. And combining those two things, I think, is a great way to think about leadership in either direction. So some things I've learned in the policy school, I pull them into Darden. And I know that going back this August, things I've learned here will definitely transfer into that degree. So I'm excited to see how both of them mesh when I finally finish the programs.
What led you to Darden specifically? How'd you end up here in Charlotte?
Yeah, so my older sister went to Darden, and initially I didn't want to come because we went to the same primary school, went to the same secondary school. We both went to Emory, and I was like, for an MBA, I do not want to be where you were. I just need space from you. But I think what really made the difference for me was I saw how close knit her and her classmates were to the point where they were on each other's bridal trains. And even till now, 5 years later, they have a book club in DC where it's made up of Darden and people's spouses. And I wanted to be in a program where I had a great community of people that I could call friends afterward. And I think the second thing was I saw how confident and comfortable she became with talking about things that she did not necessarily know everything about. And I was like, okay, well, I want an experience that really pushes me to, think outside the box and have conversations where I don't feel 100% skilled in. And I think that's really what the case study method does. It's like it has forced me to be okay with being wrong. Because you come in and you think you need to know everything, which is sort of how it is in lecture base. But with the case study, it's understanding that you don't know everything. And the point is to learn from the classmates that you have and from the professors that guide the conversation. And so even talking to my parents now, they're like, you're way more confident than you were going in and way more talkative because I talk a lot. And they're like, we didn't think it was possible for you to talk more than you already did. And so um, I think those are really the two things that I have seen make a difference for me between Darden and any other school I could have gone to.
Well, it's helpful to have a family member have gone through the MBA program before you, maybe know a little bit of what it will be like, what it looks like. But what was the adjustment like for you to being a graduate business student, specifically at Darden? I know you'd already started at the public policy school at the Batten School, but when you started at Darden that first year in the Darden School, what was that like?
It was a lot because over the summer, I had interned with McKinsey in Nigeria and I finished my internship on the 9th of August and school started on the 11th of August. So I literally got on a flight, came to the US 6 hours behind. So I was jet lagged, tired, and we were thrown straight into orientation or like leading teams. And then going straight into core and recruiting. And in the first few weeks, I was like, I don't know why I signed up for this. I feel like I'm going through so much. I was like, there are probably other things I could be doing where I don't feel like I'm being thrown in the ringer. But I would say I think the major reason why Darden really indexes on community is because you quickly realize that you cannot do everything on your own, and neither should you do everything on your own. Because when you start working and go into society, you are not doing everything on your own. I think that's one of the major reasons why they put a lot of like pressure on us is to learn how to form those relationships that are necessary. And so I'd say what I learned in my first 2 quarters of Darden was time management of, okay, I know that I'm not going to be able to do every single thing. So what resources do I need to leverage? How can I be a resource and how can I also use the people around me to get to where I need to be? And I think other than that, Charlottesville is a really beautiful place. And so even being able to experience it with my Darden classmates as well was great. Darden Cup. In boarding school, I also did inter-house sports, which is like the same thing as Darden Cup. So it was like a nice reminder of being a child, just having that, because you think you come into an MBA program, you have to be completely serious, but just having those moments break up the monotony of cases and recruiting, um, I think was really ideal. And I would say so far, I have enjoyed my first year. I definitely am not the same person I was coming in, but it's been a great time.
How do you feel like you have really kind of evolved? You mentioned obviously some confidence, more talkative or speaking up more. Are there any things that jump out to you when you think about who you were before you started the program to where you are now?
hmm I'd say one thing that Darden makes you do really early on, unconsciously, is really figure out what your priorities are. Because when you start feeling pressed for time, there are things that you have to essentially give up. And it's not a bad thing because I think once you start working, like there will be things you have to give up, but Darden helps you figure out those things early on. And so I would say for me, I realized how important it was for me to hold on to my faith, my family, and relationships. Like there were things I thought were hobbies, but then when like push came to shove, I'm like, okay, I like doing these things, but it's not necessarily necessary for me to um, you know, function. I think the other thing was I became more intellectually curious. because it's easy to just do the things that you're good at and be good at them. But taking classes like operations or um, accounting that didn't necessarily feel like my strong suit in the beginning, it was like, okay, now I feel more confident doing things that I don't feel good at. And that was something where I always prided myself in only doing things I was good at. But now I'm willing to try and put myself in situations where I will fail, because that's where I've seen that I've learned the best and the most.
Thank you for that. That feels, I mean, it resonates with a lot of what other folks have shared here on the podcast regarding how they feel like they've grown. Of course, the core curriculum, you don't get to choose those classes. You're going to take them all. It's the same for
Exactly.
all Darden students across all of our MBA programs. And there's some self-discovery that happens through that too, right? Not just the sort of stretching, taking things that may not come to you as naturally, but also maybe you realize you're more interested in something than you thought you would be. And, it's all part of the process. So I'm curious how your career goals have evolved. You mentioned last summer you worked at McKinsey, obviously going to work at Evercore this summer. Have your career goals changed much since you started at Darden? Have they been pretty consistent? Just curious.
Yeah, I would say coming in, I my major goal was I want to be in a profession where I'm able to touch different types of industries, because I wasn't exactly sure what specific industry I wanted to be, and also learn different types of clients, which is why consulting and banking were top of mind for me. But coming in, I thought I would only do consulting, because I'm like, okay, this is where I feel like my skill sets are the strongest. And talking to people who were in the professionals, like, okay, I like this. And I really enjoyed my internship. It was really fantastic. But then I'm like, you have 2 summers. Like, you can always go back to that, or you can try something else that you never know you might be good at or truly enjoy. And if you don't enjoy it, like, that's fine too. That's the point of doing these internships, is really to get a taste of what life is going to be. And so that's why I was grateful to have 2 summers. So I don't think it's changed, but it's more like evolved into, okay, let me see what I'm good at. Let me see what the opportunities are out there. And then after that, I can like see where um I can be the best possible consultant or banker that, I can be.
I like that attitude of sort of exploration and
Mhm.
discovery. That I think that's a good way to think about it. I think sometimes folks, when they look at the career process, the full-time MBA program, they really feel like they have to have everything figured out by the time they get to that
Exactly.
internship. And the internship is still part of the exploration process.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because as I talk to admitted students, I always tell them, I'm like, because they're like, what should I do before I come to school? Should I do like study? Da, da, da? I'm like, don't do that. Really spend the time thinking through different career opportunities before you come, because it's easy to feel like you have to do either consulting or banking, because those are the most structured and that's where everyone is. But there's so many experiences that you can, and of course there's a timeline. So if those are things you're interested in, have to follow the timeline. But there's still space to discover other things that you might not have thought about, that you would be good at and you really will enjoy. And so thinking about business school as a time, like, yes, to pivot, but also to see what is out there for 2 years with amazing people, I think is a great way to think about career paths from here.
Well, Sinmi, are you involved with any clubs or organizations? You mentioned second year is this time when people tend to get a bit more involved outside the classroom, which is definitely something that comes up here on the podcast. What are you involved with?
Yes, so I am the president of the Graduate Women in Business organization. I'm the vice president of fellowship for the Darden Christian Fellowship. And then I'm a member of the Finance Club, the Darden Africa Business Organization, and the Black Business Students Association, and the Latin American Students Association as well. And so I guess coming into Darden, when I was thinking about the things that I wanted to be involved in, I just wrote down my priorities of what is important to me and what clubs or organizations can fit into that. Because as I said, like, you're so pressed for time, there's so much going on all at the same time. And it's easy to feel like you need to do everything. But I knew that I wouldn't be able to thrive if I did that. So really just having all those down first and then looking for the clubs that would bring me those relationships and those experiences. And then outside of that, when other clubs have their events, I attend those. But really in terms of focusing on where I wanted to be involved, those were the ones that I chose.
How did you decide you wanted to take on a leadership role? Obviously, being president of the Graduate Women in Business Club is a big deal. How did you decide that you wanted to be a leader in a club?
Yeah, I think I definitely took a lot of time to think through doing it before I applied because I knew that it would be a heavy lift and it's easy to, just once your second year to become. And that's there's nothing wrong with that. It's figuring out what you want out of your Darden experience. I think that's the most important thing. But for me, it's like what positions and what places can I be to shape people's experiences when they come into Darden? Because these organizations can really make a difference when people are going through classes or recruiting or just life in general. Like as you asked me, there is a huge change. Like it doesn't matter if you went to undergrad, like there is a big change starting an MBA program, especially like changing to case study method, which isn't very popular in a lot of schools. And so it was, where do I think I can make the most impact? And what places made an impact on me? And how can I continue to give back in whatever capacity that I can?
Your point about the case method is interesting, right? Darden is, really kind of one of two case method schools out there. Um, how do you explain the case method to people who don't know much about it?
Mm. I think it's a lot of self learning. So if you think about a concept like, I'll just use finance because I had a finance class today, and you're thinking through how do I value this company? If you are in a regular lecture base, you come in and learn what's his valuation, what is this company, and the professor would write out all the calculations for you on the board, and you would go home, read that, and write it on an exam. But for the case study method, it takes you into the real world of these are real problems that have happened. How do we approach them? And so you'd have a protagonist in a company. So today we did one on Google, and it's like, okay, Google wants to take out a bond. What interest rates are they going to use and how? And so you really have the real life data that they've used, and then you're working to answer the question. The good thing about it is that on the other side, we usually have information about what happened. And so you can implement that. But I think what it really helps you do is that if you don't have experience in certain areas, like I mentioned, operations or accounting or decision analysis, is that because you are in class talking through, okay, these are the case facts, this is what happened, this is how we can get through, and you're working with your classmates. When you start working in your internship or a full-time role, it's like you've already flexed that muscle of having, and I mean, they give you all the facts, so you don't have to look for it, but you really flex that muscle of putting all the facts together to get an answer. And so when you start work, it's like, okay, I know what facts they gave me in the cases in school. Let me start from there and look for similar facts. And then you find more and you build. And even in talking to second years, they mentioned how doing this case study method in school was so helpful for them in their internships because during meetings, they were okay with like being wrong, but they'd always raise their hand because when you're cold called, which is a huge part of the case study. So if you don't read your case, like your professor, you can be cold called and you have nothing to say and your professor knows, but it forces you to prepare. So I'd say that's really the difference that the case study method takes, is that it really forces you to engage with the material and not just leave all the learning to your professor to impact on you, but to teach your class, to ask questions, to pull out information and expertise from other people, and really to engage like you would in an actual boardroom or meeting.
I appreciate your explanation. I know it's not always the easiest thing to capture. It can
I hope
sometimes
I
be
did
a
it
better.
justice.
I think you did. I think you did. It's some of those things that we always encourage people to come for a class visit because I think that makes
Mhm.
it very real for people. You can see what it looks like and maybe even kind of play along in your head as you watch the conversation unfold before you. Obviously, it's early days for you with GWIB. Maybe a little too soon to say exactly what you have in mind for the organization in the year ahead, but some things that are on your mind as you think about, moving into your second year as president of GWIB?
Yeah, I think what was top of mind for me was really creating a holistic experience for women at Darden, so academically, career wise, and social, because there's so many facets of life that go on here at Darden. And it's easy to feel like some of them might be neglected just because of how focused we are on academics and recruiting. But then I want GWIB to be a place where women coming into Darden can feel like they are supported from when they start and even up until graduation and after, because we have relationships with alum. And so it's not just a commitment for 1 year, it's like a lifelong commitment of connecting students, faculty, alum, and staff. I always say womanhood is very interesting because everyone is coming from a different place. So I'm Nigerian, there are people from India, there are people from the US. And so it's so different than all the African Students Organization, where we kind of have an idea of what that culture is like. And so here it's an amazing opportunity to really learn from a depth of different women with different life experiences and help each other learn and grow. And so for me, in thinking about GWIP is really celebrating these experiences that we have and understanding that life for women in the workplace is different and supporting each other in building a great, experience, so we know who to reach out to and how people got to the places that they've gotten to. Because when you can see a path, then you can see yourself getting there. And so I think that's really where GWIB comes in, is to create an avenue where you really can see that trajectory to where you want to be and the way to get there.
Well, Simi, what are you looking forward to in the months ahead? Obviously, you got an upcoming summer in New York, but what else are you excited about?
Yes, my birthday is in less than a month. So really, really excited about that. Um, I'm most likely going to be in Jamaica with my sister. So very, very, very excited for that. And I think I really do need a vacation before I start before I start, working on jumping into school. It's Easter weekend as well, which is one of my favorite weekends of the year. So just looking forward to spending time in church with friends, family, and all of that. Um, and I guess just really starting a new experience in second year and like combining both degrees. So I think there's just a lot to look forward to and a lot of changes, most importantly.
Awesome. Well, that sounds so nice. Taking a little bit of a break before your internship sounds like a good move,
I
because
think
you're
it
going to
is.
be very very busy this
Exactly.
summer. Well, last question for you here, and I'll see. We'll wrap up. But what do you look? What is your best piece of advice for our prospective student listeners? What would you encourage them to keep in mind as they think about their own MBA journeys?
I would say ask the questions that really matter to you, not the questions you think students or the admissions committee wants to hear. Because the next 2 years or your life, or whenever you decide to start your MBA journey, is going to be very unique to you and very instrumental, right? And so you want to think about, where do I want to be after and what type of experience do I want to have? And that will lead you to the questions that are important to you. So if you have a family, it's not only, oh, what's the case study method? It's what is, the classroom setting like for people with a family? Can I bring my kids to class? Can I not bring my kids to class? Like those questions that really, really matter to you and show what your priorities are. And I think even asking them elicits answers from people that are more genuine. Um, but it also helps you stand out because you're willing to be honest, with yourself. And I think that just having those honest conversations as you're going through the process will make a whole lot of difference. Because I think for me, in the times where I felt like I was struggling at Darden, when I sat down and thought about my why and the questions that I asked, it was like, okay, I'm in the right place. And that's what you want to feel like you chose the right degree, you chose the right school. And so really being honest upfront and not just choosing a school based on rankings or based on, oh, there's one alum that I want to connect with, but like, where do I see myself growing and thriving and having an amazing journey?
I love that advice. I think really being clear about who you are and what you're looking for. There's a lot of self-discovery and self-reflection that is built into the
Mhm.
application process if you really go about it in a thoughtful way. And
Exactly.
ideally, those priorities. So, what's important to you is starting to bubble up as you're researching, as you're learning more about schools, and as you're engaging more with schools and the communities there. So, Cindy, it's been great talking with you. Congratulations on all the exciting developments on your end. Congratulations on being president of WIB and on your summer internship. And I hope you have a great time in New York.
Thank you. I'm very excited. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I really enjoyed this conversation.
And that was my conversation with Sinmi Oyekola, a dual degree student in our full-time MBA class of 2026. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, and you'd like us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's Darden, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.